Welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And this week is part 2 of a special 2-part series of interviews we're doing with the UNFPA representative to Kenya, Siddharth Chatterjee. But this week, we are speaking terrorism, violence, the youth, solutions. We get your views on the issues as well. And we have Africa's top 10. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm Julie Ishuru. In the second part of our 2-part series with Siddharth Chatterjee, the UNFPA representative to Kenya, we're focusing on countering violent extremism. Let's take a look at his profile.
Siddharth Chatterjee, otherwise known as Sid, has been the UNFPA representative to Kenya with effect from 10th April 2014. Before joining UNFPA, he was the chief diplomat and head of strategic partnerships at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies (IFRC) based in Geneva since June 2011. Prior to the IFRC, he served in the United Nations since January 1997. From 2009 to 2010, he was Regional Director for the Middle East, Europe and Central Asian Republics at the United Nations Office for Project Services. From 2007 to 2009, he was Chief of Staff to the Special Representative of the Secretary General for the UN Mission in Iraq based in Baghdad, Iraq. He has also served in leadership positions in UNICEF Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, Darfur, Indonesia, and with the UN peacekeeping missions in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Iraqi Kurdistan. Before joining the UN, he was a career officer in the Special Forces of the Indian Army. He has written extensively on a range of humanitarian and social issues in a variety of journals such as CNN, Al Jazeera, Forbes, The Guardian, The Huffington Post, Reuters, The Global Observatory, The Interpress Service, as well as some mainstream Indian journals. He has a master's in public policy from the Woodrow Wilson School for Public and International Affairs at Princeton University, USA, and a Bachelor of Sciences from the National Defense Academy in India.
Let's get his views on the issues. Great to have you back with us on Africa Leadership Dialogues. And this week we're focusing on terrorism, violence, extremism, and the youth. Sid, everybody's asking the big question. Why are we seeing youth who are educated, who seem to have a bright future, and not just here in Africa, coming from many parts of the world, going into this kind of violent extremism? What's going on?
I think you brought out a very important part, the youth. And I think increasingly what we are seeing as a trend globally, I mean, it's not just Kenya, but globally, my own country is seeing a lot of insurgencies, lots of violent extremism.
And this is India, you're talking
in India. And there are several factors for it. But I think it is a sense of marginalization. It is a sense of inequity. It is a sense of injustice. It's a sense of anger. It's a multitudinous thing. And young people are more amenable to suggestions. So whether it's a religious leader or it's a terror organization, but telling them, informing them through false promises and lies and all kinds of things. I mean, look at the ISIS, for example. We've got young people from the Western countries and the US who've gone and joined the ISIS rank and file. So it's not unusual. What it is meaning is perhaps the voices of the youth need to now become much more part of nation building and the architecture of society. And I think this is where it is happening. For example, if we go back to Westgate, we look at a Norwegian young man came and participated in the violence of Somali descent. In the recent episode in Garissa, for example, there was a young law student with a very bright future ahead. So I just think that perhaps this is an opportune time to visit some of the issues that are the causes of it. And that doesn't need you don't need perhaps from an anthropological perspective, but also understanding what are the critical triggers. And I think the follow-up to the conference in Washington on countering violent extremism What the UN Population Fund really feels is that by bringing the youth into this conversation, by involving the youth in this conversation, by giving the youth the opportunities that they need to fulfill their entire human potential, I think we would be seeing a dramatic reduction of this. But till such time that engagement doesn't happen, we will continue to see these challenges.
From a practical perspective, let's use Kenya and Nigeria as examples. Boko Haram wreaking havoc in Nigeria, some gains now being made. But, you know, the mindset issues remain a huge challenge. Here in Kenya, just looking at what happened in Garissa, the violence against other students, and also the targeting of education. And you say to government, bring young people into the conversation. How do they begin to do that? How do you even start? Because there's fear, there's trepidation. How do you actually go to the ground and say, let's all come together and talk?
Right. I think, Julie, it needs a multifaceted approach. It is a governance issue. It's an issue where the county authorities need to take responsibility and start a process of engagement. It's getting the religious leaders on board, right, getting them into this conversation. It's getting the community elders, because ultimately the youth also have reference point within the community. So if the community elder is saying, we've been kind of marginalized and we've been kept out of the development curve for such a long time, that is temptation for radicalization. Get them all into this conversation. So start it at a micro level while you're looking at the macro picture. But starting that micro-level dialogue is critical. But the voices of the youth, boys and girls, young men and young women, becomes critical to this. I think access to services, access to quality education, access to proper health services, access to nutrition and food, all these are what formulate the basics of what good citizenship is all about. With the absence of these, you will find people who feel completely left out. Focusing at the county level, focusing at the micro level, I think what we would be able to do is engender that spirit of dialogue, is engender that feeling of inclusion, because it is about inclusion. It is not about exclusion. It is not any Kenyan believing that he or she has been left out. I believe it's possible, and Kenya, with a population size of 42 million, it's easy to do it. India is struggling. Let me put the facts on the table. I'd written an article once on my own country's flaws on countering the Maoist insurgency, which is far larger, much bigger. In fact, the former Prime Minister of India, Manmohan Singh, once commented, he says, the Maoist extremism is a graver threat to us than even Islamic terrorism. And he was absolutely right. The issue there is, these are people that, again, were left out of the development curve. And a lot of the young people that went in and this thing, and a lot of educated young people also went and joined this movement. So I think you can draw some conclusions from what is happening in some other parts of the world over here. But essentially, it is about engendering the change. It is about making sure that the law enforcement process works properly. It is about sensitizing the police properly about all these issues. And it's not just about using a sledgehammer of hard power, but is to look at the hearts and minds issue. And Julie, let me emphasize the hearts and minds issue, because that is what, it is our humanity which will prevail and not the violence.
So I'm going to take the three words, hearts and minds, as critical, and the big word, which is inclusion. At all levels, asking ourselves, have we achieved inclusion? Is there anybody feeling locked out of the system? If so, what are we doing to address that? And if that could happen at national level, of course, very important. At county level, critical, because you're closer to the people and you can see what's going on in the counties. Let's talk security, military response. What do we want to see and what do we not want to see?
I think the most important thing is I think Kenya can set the example of dealing with this differently, and looking at the opportunity of, militaries can also undertake hearts and minds campaign. Actually, they're pretty good at it. And good counterinsurgency strategies are about that. But let me say, Kenya has the opportunity of a demographic dividend, 13.7 million young people. It's a fair share of your population. This is your youth bulge. This is where the progress of Kenya is going to be. And as my executive director, Dr. Babatunde Osotai, repeatedly says, let's take advantage of this demographic dividend. Never ever has the world ever seen such a youthful population, and it will not happen again after many years. So let's take advantage of this opportunity that Kenya has a young youthful population. These are the drivers of Kenya's economic change. These are the drivers of change in every way of society, including ending sexual and gender-based violence. It is young people that can actually take these and make sure that those cultures start to change. So I think that investment needs to start right at the micro level. It is about, again, going back to the whole issue of inclusion. It is about making sure youth have a voice. It is about making sure that the demographic dividend benefits the country and does not become a handicap, because ultimately, as these children grow up and young people come up, you'll need to have jobs, which is a great opportunity for the country to start looking at economic progress, because otherwise, to counter violent extremism, if you have to take a military approach, well, you then have to start building up your armies, and these are long wars. India has been fighting insurgencies for 40 to 50 years.
Long and vicious.
Yeah. And vicious wars. And they become intergenerational. Yes. And I just feel that perhaps it's the right time to just look at a whole new approach. And I believe in Kenya, it has many partners, the British government, the US government, the UN family, the whole UN family. I mean, there are so many development partners which will come in as an ally in this. But the whole thing is the government needs to lead on this and to really put youth into the center of the narrative.
You're seated with Nkaiseri and the President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, and they ask you, next steps for us. What must we do? What would you say to them?
Well, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'd suggested this in this article that I co-authored with Mr. Eric Solheim, the chair of OECD DAC, is that, look, first let's understand what those key drivers are. Let's understand what those issues are. That doesn't take, that doesn't need months and months. You have the expertise in Kenya, is to understand those critical issues, because the issues in let's say, Mandera or Wajir may be very different from the issues in West Pokot, for example,
right,
where it's much more internecine rather than over here, where there is, it's taken on the mantle of more of religious extremism. So you have to look at it, as I said, both from an anthropological point of view and look at what are the key drivers. But to me, ensuring that if once you've identified that, how can we get a different set of partners, including the private sector? And I think the private sector is crucial. Kenya has a amazing private sector. These are the people that are the future. These are the people that will ensure that there are jobs. It's simple economics that kicks in, Julie. When it is about making sure that these youth feel empowered, they feel productive, they feel they have a choice and have a future. But it is in these environments where there is a sense of hopelessness, despair, and despondency that leads to the whole issue of violent extremism. So once you built in, and I think you have a fabulous president who understands it. And I just think it's about sitting down and looking at what are those options there. You have the multilateral banking systems like the Africa Development Bank, the World Bank, and many others who would participate. But it is about getting those economies to starting to roll. So
work with the partners, get the elements together, identify the critical issues.
Exactly.
Again, multifaceted.
Exactly. It's no.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
You're in a gathering of young people who are despondent. They feel marginalized and locked out. They're saying, what are options? We have no opportunities. What's your message to them?
I just think the government can give a message of hope. I mean, UNFPA will partner with the government to bring in that change and will go every last mile to make it happen. We need the leadership of the government here. We need the leadership of the county authorities here. I think the governors have a crucial role to play. After all, those governors are not being imported from anywhere else. They come from those same communities. I think it's a great opportunity for them to actually be those agents of change. And I've seen some of those governors actually trying to do that. The important thing is youth, peace, and security need to kind of go hand in glove. And I think the sense of peace, the sense of justice, the sense of reconciliation, these are all important components because, mind you, a lot of these conflicts also stem from an intergenerational perspective. It's like the class or the caste conflicts you have in India. You have your tribal conflicts here. There are age-old issues that need to be addressed. So let's get down to it. Let's start to address those issues that involve reconciliation. Let's look at issues that sustain the peace rather than being, cosmetic, and then it kind of goes back into the whole thing again. I think Kenya is in a great place to actually help show and demonstrate that change.
So it's about bringing all these parties together and ensuring that it's making the change on the ground to provide the opportunities for these young people who are so critical. And I have to say, for the young people watching, we know you are amazing. I keep saying on Africa Leadership Dialogues, young people are the hope for the continent. So the vast majority of you are working hard and transforming this continent. There are some who don't see a way out and choose perhaps the wrong paths. But for many of you, we appreciate what you do. It's about getting all of you a place where you can be productive for the continent, I think is the most important thing.
Absolutely. And you have a youthful government, you have many...
Some question, when we look at the younger leaders, some question whether that's necessarily always a good thing.
Well, I just think, you have a youngish president who's really been at the forefront, who's really taken on. I was there at a meeting on ending adolescent AIDS, and the president was passionate. He really wants to see an end to this. I mean, young people affected by AIDS, and it's mostly girls who are affected by it. While in Kenya, overall AIDS figures are dropping. In Kenya,
for young girls, it's increasing.
It's increasing.
Because, shall we be very honest, because older men are having sex with young girls.
Right. And because the young girl is not well educated, not well informed, so she doesn't know how to make informed choices. And that's why UNFP has been constantly pushing, along with our partners, that look, comprehensive sexuality education is a must. A boy and girl must have access to knowledge. It's not about having access to contraceptives. It is about having access to knowledge. And I think that is critical so that they can make that informed choice, because it is that girl that suffers at the end of the day. And I think we just have to change that paradigm. These are all contributors, mind you, to the overall sense of injustice that emanates. I think bottom line is, we've seen some tragedies which are heart-wrenching in Kenya. Nothing can justify this violence, nothing at all. But having said that, it is important to look ahead. And I think the future of Kenya is in its young people. The future economic prosperity of Kenya is in its young people. That investment this country can't go wrong with, because that is what will take this country, into the next 100, 200 years as a very progressive country. I think that's what Vision 2030 is all about. Vision 2030 cannot be carried out without young people. That will never happen.
It's their vision.
It's their vision.
It's beyond some of us.
Vision. Yeah. So I think here is a great opportunity that you've actually tackled it, not only from a very multi-sector, multi-year program, but a purposeful commitment at different political levels, at the policy levels. But for sure, you have all the development partners. I have met many of them. The British High Commissioner, the US Ambassador, the Swedish Ambassador, the Dutch Ambassador, the Danish Ambassador. I mean, all of them are talking about how can we support the government much better. Youth is becoming much more of
the central focus
of the narrative, and I think that is key.
Which it should be. Critical meeting coming up on security. It's being held right here in Kenya. Is that a message? Having it in Kenya, is that a statement of a kind, do you think, from the global community?
I don't know how it came about, but I'm sure that Kenya is hosting it, because it's several other countries that will also be joining it. But as I said, I think it's an opportunity to kind of change the discourse, to change the narrative and bring the narrative. While, law enforcement, rule of law, all these things are crucial. It's to look at what are the soft power measures, what are the hearts and mind measures that we could actually look at to transform this.
Do share your views with us. We'd love to hear from you, of course. Let's keep this conversation going on Twitter. What can we do? What do you think needs to be done, particularly where you are? Do you think there are specific conversations that should be started? Share your views with us so we can get your perspective out a little bit wider. Let's go now to the question of Africa generally. In many places, we are seeing some stability and development. In other parts, it's really heartbreaking to see some of the conflicts emerging. South Sudan being one of the areas where even now reports of vicious attacks taking place and violence. Again, women and children being the first to face the brunt of these attacks. Where do you think Africa is today? And where do you see us in the next decade or two?
Very interesting question, Julie. Before I came to take up this job, I had a few choices. And the Secretary General of the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies was a man by the name of Mr. Bekele Geleta, who's Ethiopian. So I sat down with him. I said, look, Mr. Geleta, these are my options. And he said, Sid, your best choice is to go to Africa. And I said, why do you say that? He says, that's where the future is. And it's interesting when he said that, I knew he was saying exactly perhaps what I wanted to hear. I just wanted to kind of reinforce. But I came to Kenya on the 10th of April. I left Kenya in November 2007. I was working with the UNICEF Somalia program, and I went to serve with the UN program in Iraq after that. And so I'm coming back after close to 7 years. I have seen Kenya change dramatically, and for the better, in many ways. It's had its challenges then, but there are so many aspects. I mean, when I look at some of my national staff, I can tell you these guys are rock stars. I mean, where UNFPA has come to in terms of the whole maternal health issue has really been the shoulder. They've kind of shouldered the weight and really given it the intellectual rigor. They've given it the momentum. It's the group of national staff that I have, not just in UNFPA Kenya, but across the UN system. And these are Kenyans. When I look at that, I know that when Kenya is like there into the middle income country, this is a country which is virtually a leader in the kaleidoscope of business and growth. I was in Rwanda a few months ago, and it was interesting. It was a East African business community meeting, and I was invited there to speak on the whole issue of resilience and humanitarian issues connected with women and girls in conflicts and emergencies. And it was interesting to see 70% of the leadership of this business communities actually came from Kenya. I think when I look at Kenya, I'm looking at Kenya as the microcosm of Africa, as that agent of change where it can really engender that thing. And you can see it in the Eastern Africa horizon from Ethiopia. When you go into Addis, the skyline has virtually changed dramatically. The skyline of Nairobi has transformed.
Yes, both Addis and Nairobi.
Right. Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, I mean, everywhere. I just think that what Eastern and Southern Africa are demonstrating, which perhaps is becoming the new normal for the other parts of conflict-ridden Africa to start looking at, because you need shining examples from within the continent. You don't need it from anywhere else. There are shining examples within the continent which are making it happen. I think South Sudan is a tragedy, and I just hope that it's finally put an end to. I started a UN office in South Sudan in June 2000, so I'm equally distressed.
You were engaged
in the center of it to see it happen. But I believe these positive environments will become that agent of change, will engender change. And I think you have the political leadership which has been engaging in trying to deflate conflicts, not just in South Sudan, but other parts of Africa. Because I think Africa has to have African solutions. No other country or from the world can help you do that.
Thank you so much, Sid. And we often get so locked and lost in our challenges that we don't see the opportunities. Sometimes we need a voice to tell us what's actually happening, that can see things from a different perspective, so we can leverage the opportunities that exist in our own area. And the message from Sid is Kenya could be an example so that other African states that are less stable could take a look at us and use us as almost a guiding light to a better place. And that responsibility is so critical. Before we close, and we're soon coming to the end, I must tap into the whole issue of xenophobia. And we saw the xenophobic violence in South Africa, which recurred after a few years, but when Thabo Mbeki was president, certainly that had also started at that time. Can Africa pull together? Can it open its borders? Can it trade more within? Do you have hope in that sense that Africa will achieve one Africa?
Absolutely. I mean, look at what's happening in the East African business community. Look at where it's going. So I just think Africa's at the right place. I think it's unfortunate these events of violence have happened, but I think you're at the right place. I think African history is rooted in one of great generosity, of great contributions to world affairs. I mean, humanity emerged from here. Come on, Julie. We just have to be mindful of the fact that Africa, with the right leadership which it has right now, with the kind of changes that we're already seeing in Eastern and Southern Africa, is already blazing a trail where perhaps it's also not making the mistakes of many other parts of the world which in its economic progress. So I think we are at a good place. It is about purposeful commitment. It is about making sure that all partners come together, all aspects of it come together. And I'll bring this conversation back to young people. take advantage of the demographic dividend that is in Africa's way.
Incredible. Thank you so much for staying with us for 2 shows. And please do look into the camera. And what's your final message to Africans who want to be part of positive change? How can you do it from wherever you might be? What's your message?
I have one single message. It's Africa's young people. It's Africa's youth. They are the agents of change. They will transform Africa to heights of great success, of economic progress, of equality. But youth must be at the center of this narrative. And I would just say one more thing. It is about equality. It is about gender equality. It is about ending any form of discrimination against anybody. And I think that will become the foundation on which Africa can really leapfrog ahead of all other continents in the world.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
My name is Siddharth Chatterjee. It's a tongue twister, so you can call me Sid. I'm the United Nations Population Fund representative to Kenya. And you're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogue.
Time now for your views.
This week we asked you, how has the evolution in governance and democratization affected peace and security in Africa? Farah's daughter says, it has instilled the responsibility to protect, in that when a sovereign state is unable to protect its citizens, the international community as a whole has the responsibility to protect civilians from massive human rights abuses.
Hi, I'm Faith Julie Major, watching Africa Leadership Dialogues from Kakamega County. I actually believe that good governance and ability of states to empower its citizens has actually resulted to sustainability. Give an example of countries like Botswana, Ghana, Malawi, etc.
To join our conversation, go to our G+ page, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Facebook, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Twitter, @AfricaLD. And on WhatsApp, send your video comments to +254 715 816 033.
And now to Africa's top 10.
This week on Africa's Top 10, we feature countries with the most reliable police services. The study focused on the extent in which police services can be relied upon to enforce law and order in a particular country. It is ranked out of 7. This is according to the World Economic Forum. Starting us off at number 10 is Botswana with an index of 4.3 and is ranked at number 63 globally. Coming in at number 9 is Cameroon, ranked at number 62 globally with an index of 4.35. Positioned at number 8 is Cape Verde with an index of 4.43 and is ranked 56th globally. Taking the number 7 spot is Mauritius. The island nation is ranked at number 51 globally with an index of 4.53. Slotted in at number 6 is Swaziland. The country attained an index of 4.6 and is ranked at number 50 globally. At number 5 is the Gambia. The West African Republic is ranked at number 49 globally with an index of 4.62. Senegal takes the number 4 spot with an index of 4.68 and is ranked at number 47 globally. Taking the number 3 spot is Lesotho. The enclaved South African state is ranked 45th globally with an index of 4.7. Coming in at number 2 is the Kingdom of Morocco, which attained an index of 4.9 and is ranked at number 41 globally. And at number 1 this week is Rwanda. The East African nation is ranked at number 21 globally with an index of 5.8. And that's Africa's Top 10 this week.
We end as always with African words of wisdom. It's a proverb, and this one goes: the mouth which eats does not talk. And so while it's important to have dialogue and talk to each other, it is critical that action follows. Inclusiveness, one of the key words there. Blessings to you, and blessings to Africa.